Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody. The podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas, signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today we have a legend, literally a living legend on. So we have David Yarrow, who is a legendary photographer. And in fact, if you go on Artsy, he is one of the top 10 requested artists alongside people like that only need one name like Warhol, Basquiat, and Herring. So we are really fortunate to have him here to talk about his latest book, which is David Yarrow, The Collection, which chronicles his whole career, but it primarily focuses on the works he's done since the year 2010. And a big component of what David does is giving back. And over the years, the photographs he has donated have raised approximately $20 million for various nonprofits around the world. And, he also, with his royalties of his books, those tend to go to causes as well. So we're going to really dive into photography, philanthropy, and, talk with this really creative genius today. So with that, David, welcome. And I'm just so thrilled to have you here.
My pleasure. It's always good to be in New York, where we are at the moment, and we've done, I think, about 41 days on the road, and go back to London tonight. But
Good.
it's good stuff.
Good for you, and hopefully a nice long nap once you get home.
Yes.
And I'd love for you talk about what inspired you to pursue a career in photography and kind of how that all got started to you, for you all the way up to kind of that iconic photograph at the World Cup in the mid 80s that really kind of took your career into overdrive.
I think you flatter me on the picture of Maradona taking my career into overdrive. I was a kid. I wasn't a good photographer. I think it's very difficult for someone in their teens to be that good a photographer, because photography is about your heart and soul and emotional intelligence, and very few people, I think, I certainly didn't have enough emotional intelligence to be a good photographer in my teens. I was capable in terms of, I knew my way around the conduit, which is the camera, but the lens, as one of your great photographers, Ansel Adams, said, looks both ways. It looks out, but it also looks into the practitioner. Um, After that World Cup, I did an Olympics, and I actually quit. I went and got a job in Wall Street. And to the surprise of a lot of people, I just didn't had a economics degree. There was a bit of parental pressure. I think Oliver Stone had just brought out Wall Street, and everyone kind of wanted to be Gordon Gekko or Bud Fox. So I put my cameras away, and so I went from doing a World Cups, Olympics, US Masters, and being a young kid. I remember I got two job offers, and one was from what's now Getty Images, and that was probably a job offer of about, I don't know, $27,000, and I got a job offer from a bank, and again for $27,000, and I took the job offer from the bank, and then pursued a career in finance for quite a while, set up my own fund, and yeah, I did it for best part of 25 years. But my photography was my passion, and uh, trading equities was not my passion. It provided me periods of wealth, periods of unhappiness, periods of losing lots of money. And I guess my salvation was the camera. Uh, but I didn't know how to monetize it. And you know, the average photographer in the world these days, their career lasts 2 years, and the mean take home pay of a photographer. I don't know how people know this, but apparently it's $35,000 a year, and after you're taxed on that, you ain't got an awful lot to live on. So it's a tough profession for where, when I was young, photography was something that strange people did, like kind of train spotting or looking at steam engines. Whereas now everyone's a photographer. And therefore, given there is this imbalance between demand and supply, because there's an awful lot of supply out there, um, making a living from it, uh, making enough that you can send your kids to private schools and making enough that you can look after your family and look after yourself is very difficult. And I spent 6 years working on a business plan as to how I was going to do that. And it's one thing to get the business plan. It's the next thing is to actually to execute it yourself. But we got there, and I got there, and it's been it's been a long old, as my friends joke, it's taken 45 years to become an overnight success story.
But the thing is, you put in the reps to do it. And, there's one thing, because I think COVID for a lot of people shifted. How do I really want to spend my life? And the fact that you were on, in financial services for many years, and then, but you realized that really wasn't what made you truly happy, like art and photography does. What advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about shifting careers, in kind of the corporate realm where they not be happy, to something that's a little bit more creative and just speaks to them more directly?
It's a good question. Of course, you won't be the first person to have asked me that. My circumstances were quite unusual in that my wife, when I worked in financial services, hated me with a passion that's very difficult to articulate. Um, and uh, and now that I'm doing what I should have been doing and have a passion for it, our relationship is so much better because I'm happy. And it's the old saying, if you can't be nice to someone else unless you're happy in yourself. And so the first thing I'd say for anyone that's considering that kind of career change or life change, it's a it's a decision you've got to take with your family, and whether that's something they're comfortable with. Because there might be some sacrifices. It might be that to begin with, uh, cash doesn't come so quickly in. But I think the other thing is if you do go out as an artist, and my mother was an artist, but she took false, rather kind of Corinthian pride in the idea that she didn't understand business and the idea that if you're an artist, that precluded you from the debits and credits of life. And he would say, "Oh, I'm not a businessman. I'm an artist." And I think that was naive, bless her, to the point of arrogance. Taylor Swift's a businesswoman as well as a singer. And when people want to have a go at me, and that's fine, in the UK we have the tall poppy syndrome and stuff. When people want to have a go at me, they say, "Oh yeah, but Yarrow, yeah, he's a photographer, but he's really just a businessman." And I laugh and I go, "What on earth does that mean?" Um, Tom Brady's a businessman. I think we all have to have one side of an envelope with our revenue and the other side of an envelope with our costs. And if you don't, you're an idiot.
Well, that's absolutely true. I love that advice, and it's absolutely true. Is you have to have business behind the creativity, and the fact that you spent 25 years in business, you had the tools and the means and the wherewithal to make it happen. Like you said, it took a few years to develop that business plan to make it happen, but you ultimately got there because you kept going at it because you knew it was something important to you. And I want to turn to photography as storytelling, because it really is. And a great photograph is every bit as moving as a Warhol piece, as a Basquiat piece, as a Herring piece that we talked about at the top of the show. And your book, and I'm lifting it up, and I weighed it on my scale, people. It does weigh 10 pounds. It is a beautiful, substantial 360 some pages of just incredible, incredible photography. So share with us, how photography is a form of storytelling, and kind of how you use photography to tell stories that you want to tell.
I had a lunch meeting with the chairman of the Tate Modern in London. And if you're chairman of the Tate Modern, you know quite a lot about contemporary art. And at that time, I was spending quite a bit of my uh, filming time in East Africa, photographing the greatest wildlife show on earth. And he said to me, he said, I hate to disappoint you, but of all the forms of so-called art in the world, the one that will never ever take up wall space at the Tate Modern is wildlife photography. And I said, okay. I said, and why is that? He said, because I think I know what a giraffe looks like. And I don't want someone to take a picture of a giraffe, tell me it's a giraffe, and then even more, tell me it's art. And I got exactly what he was saying. And wildlife, the photography of animals with a long lens, no matter how magnificent those animals are, is questionable whether it's art. In the very same way that photographing Rory McIlroy fist pumping at the Greens and Bethpage last week, it's reportage. It's tomorrow's newspaper rather than art. And the most important thing I did in my whole photographic journey was pivot away from being known as a guy that was documenting the natural world, because it is now so saturated with people going, and there was quite a lot of documentation this summer about the number of photographic jeeps getting in the way of animals in the migration in Kenya and Tanzania, and it's just become overkill. So the one thing that people know that pisses me off is whenever someone says, I'm a wildlife photographer. No, I'm just a photographer. But I recognized that I had to tell stories as opposed to just take a picture of an animal and people think that that's art. I think we did it immersively. I think we did it with a huge consciousness of compositional balance, lighting, to try and really reach into the heart and the emotion of the animals. And we would be brave. We'd get close, be ground up, perspective. I'm a person that wants to remind people of the beauty of the world. I'm not a photographer that wants to virtue signal or preach and tell people how miserable we all are as a generation. Storytelling, we're all storytellers. My heroes are storytellers. Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese. In the current generation, Taylor Sheridan. I'm lucky enough to collaborate with some of those guys, and they're proper storytellers. You know, when we go out for dinner, I had dinner last night with a group of people. Hopefully, we're at an age now where we're not scrolling through social media. So, what do we do when you're going at dinner? You tell stories. I'm sure you did last night as well. New York, full of people that just tell stories, and that's what I want my pictures to do: is to tell stories, which is tough in one image with no sound. Um, you've just got, and the way around it is to have layers in the image. So you have a foreground, you have a middle ground, you have a background, and uh, it's an iterative process. I'm hopefully my best years are ahead of me, and we've learned because we know what elicits emotion and what doesn't.
That
Uh,
that that's a really good way of looking at it. I'm glad you brought that up. And I know one of the ways you elicit emotion, when I was talking to the people at Rizzoli, they mentioned, you particularly enjoy telling local stories, that are tailored towards specific audiences. So talk about that and what advice you would give to somebody, and, I know we talk a lot about philanthropy on this show, but what advice you would give to somebody looking to better understand their audience or their community?
it's I talked earlier on about some people that if they want to have a poke at me, they'd go, "Yeah, he's a business guy." And one of the things where I think we have been smart is we do target market. So if you just got a massive ranch in Jackson Hole and you wake up to the Tetons every morning, why on earth would you want a picture of an elephant in your ranch? It's got nothing to do. There's no elephants that live in the Tetons. You might want a picture of a bear or a moose or a bison or a bunch of men with disposable moral fiber in a cowboy bar or something like that. But you don't want a giraffe. Equally, if you are um, of Italian extraction and you live second generation in New York, maybe you want to have a picture of Napoli or the Amalfi Coast. So we very much play to the communities. And in Texas, we spend a lot of time in Texas. We understand that it's that tremendous writer Steinbeck. He said, well, he said it's close to a religion. It's a state of mind close to a religion. Texans are very proud of being Texans, aren't they? So if you're Texan, you want pictures of longhorn cattle or cowboys or the early days of the oil industry. You're not really that interested in having pictures of lobster catchers in Maine. But if you're in Maine, you want to maybe have the lobster catchers and not the longhorn. So because we're a global brand, we still do target market, and we're very conscious of the importance of Americana and the different parts of America.
I'm glad you brought that up because being based in Austin here, I know quite a few people that have quite a few of your pieces and are very, very avid fans because you do, like you said with your collaboration with Taylor, you really understand the ethos of the Texan and the pride that goes into it, and you can see it through the photographs. And I appreciate you kind of saying, giraffe and the Tetons. That's a really, I think that's a really good, succinct way of, of doing that. And that kind of leads me to your book. Tell me what inspired you to create the collection.
Yeah. When most people do a retrospective, let's face it, it can sometimes be either both lazy or um, slightly profiteering, but we don't profit from books. Books are like business cards to us. Um, because a retrospective, by definition, means that you're probably going to be printing work that you've printed before. It's just the kind of best of. And I thought I got to a stage in my life where the material was strong enough. I reckon if you look at most picture books, and I'm very critical of myself. I think the previous books, let's say you got 150 pictures in a book, 160. I reckon if you went through 100, mine, other people's, I would say that 20% of the pictures are memorable. Um, Maybe 10% are special, and then maybe 70% are fillers that are never going to be in a museum. They're never going to be in people's home. They just fill up the book. That's kind of miserable, isn't it? That you've got a book and 70% are fillers. Uh, and I would say that of my previous books, that maybe not 70, maybe 60% were fillers. Um, I think I think in that book, um, the sales of photographs in that book are in excess of $100 million. So there are not too many fillers in that book. There are a few, but they are the kind of my greatest hits, if you like. Um, and if the book had been published, uh, printed today, we would have had a chance to remove maybe three or four and put the three or four that I've taken in the last 6 months that are better than the three or four that were left in there. Uh, but I think I wanted to do it chronologically uh, because I think David Bowie had that wonderful expression that he said, "Aging is the wonderful process where you become the person you've always wanted to be." And I think aging for me has been the process where I've become the photographer I've always wanted to be. I've got better. There's so many miserable things about getting older. It's just there's a long list, but one of the good things is you should get better at photography. because you've learned by your mistakes. Um, you've and it's an iterative process, and I think you emotionally you mature.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw the evolution of your work in looking at the book. And one of the things in the last few years that's been really interesting is you're doing quite a few images of people with animals. Like, probably my favorite, the one that really struck my eye, a lot of them did, but one that really did was Cindy Crawford in the convertible with the wolf.
Yeah.
So, talk about how you are able to corral, for lack of a better word, having a supermodel and an animal kind of be all cohesive in one, because that's kind of what I think the brilliance of your recent work is how do you get the animal to behave and I mean, the supermodel will be the supermodel, but how do you get
Or,
those two to be cohesively make sense?
some of the girls, it's how do you get this? How do you get the supermodel to behave? I think is more
Oh.
the um, uh, so the starting premise on this is that, and we look at our metadata. We're numbers people. Celebrity photography in itself, celebrity portraiture is not commercial. I'm sorry, and some people will have a go at me, but I think Annie Leibovitz would agree manifestly. I think if you can take a brilliant picture, as she has consistently done throughout her career, whether it be Whoopi Goldberg in a bath of milk or whatever it might be, but why would someone pay $25,000 to put that on their wall? Um, unless there is some special, really special connection with that person. I think the individual has to be iconic at a level that generationally iconic. Marilyn Monroe, Jack Nicholson. Uh, but there aren't many of those people knocking around. So even Cindy, who's brilliant, just brilliant, and my team love her to bits. She's beautiful inside and outside, and got no ego, and looks after the most marginal person on set. Makes everyone feel very comfortable. But I'm not sure whether just taking pictures of her as one of the most striking generational talents is enough. There's got to be parody. We did a thing with um, John McEnroe. Everyone in America loves John McEnroe because he challenged authority. He was a brat, still kind of is. He's Johnny Mac, and but if I just took a picture of him with a tennis racket or with a guitar, I just don't know whether that's enough. But if you put him in the oldest Irish bar in New York with the people that look like the village people from the old days, when, of course, village people were at their prime when he was at his prime, and throw a wolf into the bar, then people look at it again and go, that's just not, it's just not Johnny McEnroe. It's Johnny McEnroe with a wolf and village people. That's cool. And then we got You Cannot Be Serious written on the bar and whatever. Same with, so we're always trying to think of ways to cause people to do a double take. I don't like the word juxtaposition. It's kind of used a little bit too much, but I quite like a bit of visual conflict, a visual tension in a picture. And the we started working with Wolves and Cindy way back in about 2018, and they were real wolves. We stopped using real wolves because we got a little bit of heat. It's another area we could talk about, but certainly whatever we'd like to call about in our era of enlightenment or wokeism or cancel culture or whatever you'd like to call it, it certainly is impinged on the creative arts, whether it be with comedians, whether it be with fashion photographers, or in my case, it was the use of animals in sanctuaries for commercial gain. Um, And the wolves, they aren't in that argument, which, by the way, mostly comes from people thumping away in a Starbucks in Seattle that have never been in the wild. Not that I've got anything against Seattle, but the the for if you have a sanctuary with animals, how does that sanctuary survive? Well, it survives quite often through filmmakers and Hollywood. It doesn't survive from visitors. It's from working with people like us. And then, of course, if you get criticized for using animals in those sanctuaries, so you stop doing it, the animals are euthanized. So all these people that doing the virtue signaling about how dare you use these animals for commercial gain, we're actually keeping the animals alive. Anyway, we don't use wolves any longer. We use things called Tamascan, which are 99% wolf, but they're registered as dogs, and there's about 8 of them in America.
Oh, that's interesting. So there's actually, okay, I didn't realize that because and I've seen documentaries on how dogs have evolved from wolves. So that's interesting that it's almost like first generation
Yeah,
domesticated wolves that will become something else eventually. Oh, that's really cool.
I mean it's a whole different conversation where I could talk to you for hours about it. You know, the in the UK, we're shit at most things in the UK at the moment. But the two things we've always been quite strong in the commercial creative arts, Premier League football, and then wildlife documentaries. The BBC Natural History Department has always been very strong. But 20 years ago, if you put a camera on the ground in front of a giraffe or whatever, people would say, "Oh, that's very clever and immersive, and you're getting in fresh angle." Now people would say, "What happens if the giraffe steps on the camera and hurts its foot, or you've altered the giraffe's routine of travel, or whatever?" So it's become all that's become a little bit of a minefield, and we've removed ourselves totally from it, really.
I and that's understandable given, the time and the circumstances. And I want to go back, we were talking about celebrities and high profile people
Yeah.
earlier, and your book included a foreword by your friend, the late Robert Redford. If you don't mind, what is a favorite memory you have of him? And what was it like for him to write the foreword of the book, now knowing that the book is out, that, he's no longer with us physically, but is spiritually?
It's funny because it's when people like Robert Pass or Jane Goodall yesterday, I kind of think all these people are immortal. So when they die, it's a reminder. It'll be the same when Clint Eastwood one day, I'm sure, will live another 20 years or whatever. But I always thought these people were immortal. Um, Robert is cheeky and it was mischievous, was a troublemaker, and he was his eyes had mischief all over them. And whether it be him sneaking out to take a cigarette, or whether it be just pouring a little bit of vodka when no one was looking into his glass, um, uh, but alert all the time, alert. Uh, and he he was interested and interesting. A lot of people are one or the other, um, and I think if you're that high profile person, you're always going to be interesting, but it's very flattering when they're interested as well. Uh, and uh, his knowledge spans so many different areas, which I've a breadth of knowledge, and of course, for the American West, he was a proper custodian of the glory of the American West, and I think, and all, I like the fact that he was someone that danced on the edges of Hollywood. Um, Someone once told me the importance of dancing on the edge of the dance floor, not on the dance floor. I was never anywhere near the dance floor, but I find sympathy with his remove wanting to be on the edge of the dance floor. When he was after when Butch Cassidy and whatever, when there was no more high profile person in Hollywood, he took his horse and went on that trail for 3 weeks just camping. I don't think you get many of Generation X people doing that at the peak of their fame in Hollywood now. Um, a wonderful man, and just so many talents. Just love of skiing, love of film, love of journalism, um, um, and yet someone that in his life had had so many tragedies as well. But very very honored that he was far too kind. I must have paid him some money for the.
I think it's just, when two people vibe and click, two people vibe and click, and you could just tell by that forward that you two did. And I want to turn to philanthropy because what I admire about you is that's really a very important part of who you are and kind of how you present your brand and your essence. And, at its core, this book, my understanding is that you're donating the royalty fees to various charities that are important to you. So talk about the importance of giving back as a part of just, your personal and professional ethos.
Sure. Uh, First and foremostly, I think it gives an extra sense of purpose to everything we do. Number one, my wife runs our foundation. Um, there's nothing I hate more than going to a black tie dinner um, uh, and just eating and sitting next to people that I don't know. For some bizarre reason, she loves it and she does it every night and raises an awful lot of money and doesn't put on any weight. I don't know how she does it. Um, and if you're trying to meet people that are well known and have put the money side of things to bed, uh, and you're looking to work with them, I think there's three things you must do. Number one, you cannot abuse their time. Number one, the time, because that's the one thing they're short of. And I can relate to that a little bit. That's the thing that I've my shortest commodity. Number two, um, you have to offer them something that is fun and creative, not banal. And number three, if you can find a way whereby you can collaborate and raise money for charity rather than having a strictly transactional relationship. Let's take for example, um, John McEnroe. John doesn't need, well, he said he could get him a new guitar, but the idea of paying John 20 grand and working as a one off, don't think that's going to work. So what we do is we have a formula whereby we pay for the production costs, and sometimes our production costs are high. Sometimes we might spend 150,000 on a day. They give their time for free. Um, and by the way, someone like Cindy, if someone really wants to hire her as the model of the generation, she might be 250,000, but she would give her time for free. And then when the project gets into profit, we split the profit 50-50 with the people that we're partnering with. So I wear the downside. They have no downside risk other than a misuse of their time. And then the upside is shared. And normally with a philanthropic bent. And it's kind of worked over the last 10 years with the golf. We dressed up everyone in Dumbo outside, where Once Upon a Time in America was done, and I spent $200,000 uh, on the shoot with the European Ryder Cup team with their caddies, whatever. But we think that picture, when all's said and done, could raise €1 million for Ireland and causes in Ireland when the Ryder Cup comes around in 2 years' time. So we've met some very special people the best part of my job is the special people that I meet. If we have every night this week, we have a piece of art in auction somewhere around the world. We've got one in Dallas, actually, with um, it's a big event. I think
Is it the cattle barons?
yeah, I think it's a big one that's your I think Taylor Sheridan will be going. I think and your Dallas Cowboy owner and stuff like that. I can't actually go, but and then we had one in London last night, one in London the night before, and it's not totally altruistic. And I would put my hand up and say that we have benefited from it because the auctioneers all know us. We're a known artist, and if a picture goes for 100,000 and it's selling in the galleries for 50, well, it's kind of brand affirming. It shows that the brand is powerful, uh, and that's so it kind of works that way. But I think the biggest benefit, we pediatric cancer care. That's where we work with Cindy. She works with the University of Wisconsin's pediatric cancer care unit. For my children as well, I've got two kids, and um, I think for them, spending time with people that have been less fortunate than them in their life, either through illness, um, underprivileged backgrounds, suboptimal parent, whatever. Well, they've got a suboptimal parent in me, so but it lends perspective as well. Um, and we sent there's a thing called street soccer in Scotland for homeless people that have maybe been alcoholics, taken drugs, and live on the street. And this is uh, this charity gives them a sense of purpose and a community. And we donated 500,000 to that last year, which allowed them to play in the World Cup of homeless people in Korea, which was quite
Oh,
extraordinary.
interesting.
So it's it's symbiotic. I think is not a bad word in that we we benefit. We get nourished by the fact we've got an added sense of purpose. We meet people, it helps the brand, but we also have the capacity to raise a lot of money.
That's incredible. And, because you mentioned, like every day this week, and I think the one that's this week, I think is Amfar. I think that's the one that you're probably thinking of.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly it. Okay, great. So, but what makes you, because I'm sure you get tons and tons and tons of requests for photographs, and you obviously love to help everybody, but you can't necessarily. But when a nonprofit pitches you, what makes you say, yes, I will donate a piece of my work to your event, organization, auction, whatever it is?
Um, well, the first thing is you got to make dead sure there's money in the room because if um, it's an auction and you've got a reserve on the picture because you have to put reserves on because if our gallery in New York's 800 yards away, and if they heard that one of my pictures had sold for 20% of the gallery price, it doesn't help them, doesn't help me. So you have to put a reserve. So the first thing would be the amount of money in the room, uh, and we would rely on the organizers to tell us that. Uh, the second thing is that if there's I think that's the number one screen. Uh, we can't be everywhere, and some of these organizations, not the one we just talked about in Dallas, where we know it's a strong committee, but there are quite a few amateurs in this world as well, and we're wary of people that we find out whether they talk a good game, but actually there's, and of course the other auction lots. If the other auction lots are all, I don't know, a trip to Broadway for £500, I don't want to put my art next to that.
That,
Um,
yeah,
but uh, we tend to find ways to say yes.
that's fantastic. And I mean, and $20 million, through some of the auctions you've given to is absolutely. I mean, that's incredible, and that just goes to show. I mean, that's incredible, almost what do we call it? Extreme generosity or an abundance of it. I think that's just amazing. And I know we're coming up on time, and I want to. You're going to have a very interesting answer to this, so I can't wait to ask you that. And that is, what is one thing all great photographs have in common?
I think it's true of art as well, but surely the best photographs can be looked at for a long time. The best photographs can hopefully never be retaken. And the best photographs um, are have an authenticity. So you've asked me for one, and I've given you three. So if we pare it down to one, the best photographs can be looked at for a long time. If you come down your stairs and you've got a photograph that you spent some money on, or maybe yours, you should be able to look at it every morning and smile and look at it again and see something new, see something fresh, or just be reminded of the beauty of the world. Um, I don't think I'm not, I'm, there are some photographers that specialize in teaching to us and preaching to us. And I get that. Um, the type of photographs that you're going to see in the New York Times are they educate us, but they're maybe not pictures. They're photojournalistic pictures. They're from people that are very brave and people that might be working in war zones right now. For me, my pictures should make you smile and remind us that we live in a wonderful planet.
I cannot thank you enough, David. You gave us, and the great thing about the answer about the all great photographs having in common is, you know, you demonstrated perfectly how photograph is art because every single time you look at a photograph, just like a piece of art, you
Yep.
experience and look at something new. So thank you so much for joining us
Not,
today, David. I was thrilled to have you.
not at all. Good book collection behind you as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And to buy David Yarrow's latest book, David Yarrow, The Collection, visit davidyarrow.photography. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.